All right. Welcome to, what did I call this webinar? Let me refer to my notes. How to detox from self-criticism. Hello, I'm Julie Squires. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. Super excited to have you here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And my plan is to, dig deep into a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm self-critical. I'm a self-professed recovering self-critic, but that doesn't mean that every single day I'm not struggling with it, because I am. And I think that's just that's part of our practices. That's part of what it is that, we'll constantly be struggling with, this tendency to want to be cruel to ourselves. And I know that seems really odd, but stick with me on that. And what really matters is our consistency and the way we talk back to this part of ourselves that sometimes can be downright bullying. So I'm going to get to my screen here. I hope to come back and forth to you on camera as well, showing you some slides. But sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes I start freaking out and sweating, and it's really hot here. So if you hear a fan in the background, that's why. Okay. If you don't know who I am, this is me back in the dark ages when I worked in a veterinary practice. And I have worked in the field of veterinary medicine for 25 years. Starting out as a veterinary assistant, I worked as a hospital administrator, and then many, many, many years in industry sales, training, things of that nature. So I then became certified in compassion fatigue and founded my own company called Rekindle, because I was extremely affected by the amount of veterinarians that I was in contact with that were committing suicide, and I wanted to make a difference. I'm also a certified life coach, and I'm actually currently I'm halfway through another certification for life coaching. So life coaching is my jam. It really is. Like, compassion fatigue is my area of interest, or I should say personal development and well-being is my area of interest. And mostly what I'm interested in is teaching folks like yourselves how to live the life that you want to live, how to do the work that you want to do in the world without it ripping your heart apart. And I know that's a tall order, and I'm up for the challenge, because it certainly can be done. I know the work that you do is challenging. And I do believe, though, that there are some skills that we can learn, some practices that we can start to embody that really, truly can help us. So I'm passionate about a lot of things. Pugs, don't judge me on that. I got a couple roaming around this place. Who knows? There might be one climbing over my head before we're done here. Cycling, personal development, and like I just said, improving the well-being of all of you. Here's a little bit of how I spend my time when I'm not doing this. This is me and my husband having a little fun here at a wedding. He's fake choking me with the necklace. That's how we roll around here. I'm sorry. So like I said, I'm a lover of pugs. That's Ernie in the wheelchair, Mabel in the tutu. And I didn't tell you this already, but I don't only like pugs, but I also like pigs. So that is my friend Mario down in the lower corner here. So if you know anything about my work, you know that I do lots of things. You may have seen me in your practice or your organization, your shelter, or somewhere doing a seminar or workshop or at a conference. Hopefully you've attended some of my other webinars, and if not, you're now on my list, so you'll know of other webinars that I'm doing. You may have worked with me privately. I coach people one-on-one, and you may have heard about or been enrolled in my Compassion Fatigue online course. So I am opening that up for registration. Actually, it's open right now, so I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. All right. I really only have one rule, and it's, here's the deal. You showed up tonight, and what I would love to ask you to do is to cut out the distractions. In other words, this beautiful thing right here, put it on silent. Nothing earth-shattering is going to happen, hopefully, in the next 60 minutes that's going to take you away. If you're on your computer watching this, I'd love to ask you to close out all of the tabs. I'd like to ask you to be present for yourself. Not for me. I'm present for myself all the time. I want you to be present for yourself because I want you to give yourself your time and attention. All right, let's get to it. So like I mentioned, I'm a coach, so I work with people privately, and it's really interesting whether it's a veterinarian, a shelter worker, whether it's somebody who works in rescue or a veterinary technician or somebody who works in animal control. I hear these common things come up. I hear the way people talk to themselves, right? And there's this sense of I'm not good enough, and whatever that might mean. I'm not a good enough mother, a good enough ACO, a good enough veterinarian. There's this sense that whatever I'm doing, I should be doing it better, or I should be doing more of it. And I hear a lot of things of I'm too something. For me in my life, I'll be transparent right up in the get-go, for me, my I'm too was I'm too fat. That was where I started being self-critical of myself at a very, very, very early age. It was about my body. So that was, but for some people it's I'm too tall, or I'm too clumsy, or I'm too dumb, or I'm too unreliable. Like tons of things could fit into that category. And again, relating to self-criticism. I'm a fraud, right? Like imposter syndrome is just another way we criticize ourselves. It's we call it a syndrome. It's just where, who am I to go out into the world and talk with people about their mental health and well-being? Like, I'll be honest, I don't have that because I feel like who better than me? Because I've struggled with all of this stuff myself. But this whole idea about I'm a fraud and an imposter syndrome, again, it's just a different side of the coin of self-criticism. And then again, so many of you feel like you're not doing enough. And I hear this a lot. You're not doing enough either to help patients, to help dogs and cats in the world at large, to help your employees, to help your children, your family. You're not there enough. You're not a good enough parent, all of that stuff, a good enough spouse. I'm not doing enough. And it all really comes down to whatever I am, isn't good enough. Like whoever I am, that's the whole premise behind self-criticism, is that whatever it is, it's not good enough by some definition. So speaking of definition, I have a really interesting definition that I came up with in regards to self-criticism, and it's kind of long and wordy, so I'm going to read it to you. You sit back and relax. I got you. Your job is to relax. I'm going to read for you. So here's the definition. An intense and persistent relationship with the self, characterized by 1, an uncompromising demand for high standards in performance, and 2, an expression of hostility and derogation towards the self when these high standards are inevitably not met. So many things struck me, and here's actually where this comes from. So many things struck me about this definition. Firstly, just the whole idea about uncompromising demand for high standards. And second, this expression of hostility and this derogatory nature that comes with when we criticize ourselves in this way. And that, again, we're creating these standards that we can't even measure up to. So you can start to see how it starts to create a cycle, because we're setting ourselves up for something that oftentimes will never be satisfied. Right? Well, again, in my life, I was never thin enough. Now, I didn't tell you that this whole history that I had with my own self-criticism, again, my body was never perfect. Even when I was anorexic and weighed less than 90 pounds, my body was still never perfect. So there was just this constant stream of self-criticism. And if you're willing to be honest with yourself, self-criticism, the behavior in itself is self-assault. Like, it's assaulting. We are assaulting ourselves. Now, I tell us that mostly so that we're really honest with ourselves and we look at it for what it is. And when we look at something for what it is, then we have the ability to change it. Now, here's what's so interesting. Not one of us was born being self-critical. Not one of us was born like, oh, I'm too small. Oh, I'm too long of a baby. Oh, my hair is awful. Or I don't have any hair. There's something wrong with me. The baby next to me has hair. Can you imagine? Like if we were literally in the nursery in the hospital looking around going, oh, I'm too pale. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. Like it'd be nuts in there. My gosh. So, we are not born this way. Like this either develops as a way to navigate through stress in our lives. We become hypercritical, self-critical, or it's implied on us that something is wrong with us and again, this comes through adults, right? That we're not measuring up in some way. And for me, that was, my mother making a comment about how I better watch what I was eating, because in puberty around 13 or so, she said, oh, you better watch it in regards to my weight, right? Now, and I took that and in that instant, and it was a moment, and it was such a moment that I know exactly where I was standing in my house. It's a moment that is frozen in time for me. Why? Because I've spent the last, 35 years pushing against that one moment where all of a sudden I got the message that whatever I am is wrong. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I need to change who I am because I just got the message that this is not good enough. The funniest part about all of this is when I finally told my mother about that, and I don't know, I told her about that 10 years ago or something like that, about that moment. She doesn't remember it at all. Like, here it is that I spent, better part of 3 decades pushing against a comment that she made, and she doesn't even remember anything about it. She doesn't even remember saying something like that. So interesting. All right, here's the big myth. Are you ready for it? Come back to me. I see you looking at your phone. Don't do it. Here's the big myth. The big myth is that self-criticism does not make us better. We think that we need it for self-improvement and self-growth. We think that it's motivating. If self-criticism was motivating, first of all, no one would ever be overweight. That's the truth, right? And so we think that it demonstrates honesty and scrupulousness and responsibility and integrity. It doesn't do any of that. It's fake news. Hate to use that, but it's true. It's fake news. So, but here's what you must understand. I'm gonna see if I can come back to camera for a second. See you guys all here. Oh, Minnesota. Hello, Julie from Minnesota. So it doesn't make us better. It actually does the reverse. It makes us worse. Why? Well, here's what you need to understand. You need to understand that our thoughts, our critical thoughts, I'm too fat, I'm not a good enough vet, I'm a terrible technician, I'm not doing enough. Those critical thoughts, our thoughts create our feelings. Those critical thoughts create your feelings. So a negative thought does not create a positive feeling. A thought of I'm too fat does not create a feeling of inspiration or love or motivation. It actually creates a negative feeling of self-loathing, guilt, depression, right? Or depressed. So your thoughts create your feelings. Your feelings fuel your actions. I'm going to show you a model to break this out a little bit closer to you. But so really think about that for a second. So the way you talk to yourself, our thoughts create our feelings. So right there, again, negative thoughts do not create positive emotion. They create negative emotion. And since your feelings are what then fuel your actions, you can see how a feeling state such as self-loathing does not create an action where all of a sudden we feel self-loathing, so then we go to the gym. Like, it actually doesn't work that way. It doesn't. A feeling of guilt does not cause us to then show up in the world the best expression of ourselves. It causes us to shrink and become less than. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Let's see here. Let's go back to where we were. All right. So we debunked that myth. Guess we have to go through that slide again. All right. Here's what I found so interesting is that self-criticism. So let me step back to say that there was some research done in the US, in Canada, and I know I got some Canadians here, and in Europe, that demonstrated that self-criticism is a cause and a consequence of certain conditions such as anxiety, eating disorders, substance abuse, juvenile delinquency, physical health problems, and even suicidality. So it's the cause and consequence of these issues. It's not the outcome. So I want that to sit with you for a second. In other words, self-criticism does not come as a result of these disorders. It comes as a cause and then a consequence. It creates depression, anxiety, these other things. Self-criticism creates these things, and then it becomes a consequence. That's a really important thing to understand. So I have a great visual here that I think might even bring that closer. Oh, but before I go there, let me say this, because I think this is also important, is that self-criticism also is a cause for compassion fatigue. No question about it. Our beliefs about ourselves certainly are a stressor that leads to compassion fatigue. When we are beating ourselves up, of course, that is eroding of who we are. And yes, it is, of course, helping to create the environment which can be rich for compassion fatigue. All right, so here is the image that I was talking about. So you see self-criticism up in the yellow here. And when we are living in a world of self-criticism, it creates this negative environment for ourselves. And that, again, because they're negative feeling states, which then create a sense of distress of ourself, right? We're feeling distress, which then creates more self-criticism. And as you can see, the cycle repeats, right? It just becomes this, I don't know if this is a positive feedback loop or a negative, but whatever. It's clearly, you can see that self-criticism begets self-criticism. That's the important thing here. So like I already told you, this is how things work. Things in the world, circumstances, those are facts, right? Those trigger thoughts in our brain. And okay, so using the example that I've been, a circumstance is how much I weigh, for instance. That can trigger a thought in my mind. The thought in my mind could be, I'm too fat, which causes a feeling of self-loathing. The action that self-loathing creates probably is overeating or binge eating. And the result is gain more weight. So this model works for everything, right? It's showing you that circumstances, facts, don't create our feelings. What creates our feelings is our thoughts about facts. So, for instance, I had a veterinarian that I was working with that had a patient under anesthesia that it wasn't going well. So she decided to stop the procedure. So the circumstance was she stopped the procedure because the patient was turning blue under anesthesia. And her thought about that was, I'm a terrible doctor. And her feeling then, of course, was self-doubt. And her action was that she was beating herself up. And the result was that she wasn't showing up really who she was. She wasn't showing up as a great doctor because she was filled with negative thoughts. So all I wanted to show you here is the connection between your thinking and your feeling and your actions. So here we go. Self-hatred, self-criticism. We think beating ourselves up is useful. It makes us better and shows that we care. But it's actually just self-involvement. And what is self-involvement, you might be wondering? I was wondering too, so I looked it up. Self-involvement is something that you all run from because it's something you all abhor. Self-involvement is defined as preoccupation with oneself or one's own affairs to the exclusion of others or the outside world. So it's basically selfish. It's basically self-absorbed. And what it is it's the opposite of self-awareness. It's the opposite of self-reflection. It's the opposite of introspection. And those are all the things that we're all striving for, right? So what I'm showing you here really is just how we sort of get so stuck in this, and how it takes all of our energy too, right? When we are consumed with ourselves, when we are consumed with beating ourselves up, it does zap all of our energy. And again, that leads to something such as compassion fatigue. So I want you to think about, I want to shift your perspective a little bit here, have a little fun with Dudley Do Right, Snidley Whiplash, and whoever that girl is. These are like old cartoons, but when you look up victim, villain, and rescuer, these were who came to mind. So I want you to think about everything that happens there, or the stories that we project in our lives as having a victim, a villain, and a rescuer. So in this image, for instance, the girl, she's the victim. The rescuer is Dudley Do Right for sure. And the villain here is the guy on the right. He's Snidley Whiplash. I don't know where these names came from, but so what does that mean? I want you to think about a situation that happened today, at work, for instance, or maybe if you were just, out and about, anything that was dramatic, anything that our mind latches onto that creates a story around. You will see that our mind loves to have a story that has a victim and a villain and oftentimes a rescuer. So stick with me for a second. Here's what I mean about that. Within ourselves, we all have that, right? Like we all sometimes have felt like a victim. Like, in my own story here, I felt like a victim to my mother's comments about my body. Sometimes we feel like villains. Like sometimes we're villains to other people, and sometimes we're villains to ourselves. And sometimes we are the rescuer. So if you work in veterinary medicine, oftentimes you will see clients as the villain, right? When clients are acting inappropriately, when clients are screaming and yelling at the front desk, you will often see them as a villain, or they're screaming and yelling at you. If you work in a shelter or in animal control, it's someone in the general public is probably the villain. And if they're screaming and yelling at you, you're probably the victim. If you're witnessing somebody screaming and yelling at somebody else, you might be the rescuer because you might be wanting to help them out. So, we don't have to look very hard to see the villain. And we see it all the time, and I hear about it all the time whenever I'm, speaking conferences and stuff like that, and I ask what's difficult about the work that you do. When you talk about the people, you're always telling me about how what's so hard is that people treat you so rudely, the general public, clients, coworkers, and you're always, really upset about that. And I know so many of you are like, well, I would never speak to somebody like that. I would never come into, a place of employment and say, all you do is care about the money, or I would never come in and just dispose of, a pet that I no longer want. I'd never treat somebody like this is what you think. And I think all the time when I see somebody being treated poorly. But then, isn't it interesting how then when we're having an interesting day, like we go into our office or we go home and we beat ourselves up in the same way for something that happened to us that day, where we didn't show up good enough, where we, quote unquote, made a mistake, where maybe we didn't handle a situation right, or maybe we weren't able to get to our kid's soccer game, or maybe we, worked a really long day and when we got home, we were cranky to our spouse and then we beat ourselves up over it, right? So what I'm getting at is that we're often the villain to ourself, but yet we see it out in the outside world and we're like, oh my gosh, I would never treat people like that. But yet we treat ourselves like that on the daily. So here's what we need to talk about. We need to talk about our relationship with ourselves, because self-criticism is, by and large, a disconnection from the self. It is. It is not understanding or not being connected to knowing who we truly are. It's a sense of loss. We're lost in who we truly are because we're trying to hold ourselves up, oftentimes to somebody else's definition of us, or just something that's so outrageously so high to even achieve. And in so many instances, again, like I said before, we weren't born self-critical. for most of us, there was a moment in time where an adult who was probably doing the best that they could, want to have some empathy for, adults in our lives, especially when we were growing up. But for most of us, this happened at a very early age, that somebody had an opinion of us, and we interpreted that something was wrong with us and that we needed to fix ourselves, or that whatever we were wasn't good enough, right? And for those of you, that might be veterinarians here. Maybe it didn't even happen until vet school, where somebody all of a sudden criticized you, and then you took that to an internal place, right? So sit back. I have something else to read you, but before I get there, here's what I want to say about this relationship to self. Emotions are energy, right? So criticism is an emotion. It's a feeling. Criticism is actually a feeling. Critical, that's a feeling. And again, it comes from that thought of, I'm too blah, blah, blah. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. That creates the feeling. Remember, thoughts create your feelings. So critical is a feeling. Feelings are emotions. Same thing. Two different words for the same thing. Feelings are emotions. Emotions, that word emotion means energy in motion. That's what emotions are. Energy in motion. So if you look at the wide range of emotions, you can actually pare it down to just two kinds of energies. And we get to decide which way to go. The two energies are love and fear. I'm going to repeat that. Love and fear. Those are the two energies. And we get to decide what energies we want to buy into, what energies we want to experience, what energies we want to propel our lives from. You can imagine which one's going to be preferred, right? So fear, the energy of fear, and again, all of the other negative emotions really are an expression of fear. Self-criticism is certainly an expression of fear. There's fear there about who we are not measuring up. And I want to suggest for your consideration that when we start talking about, and that's where I'm moving with this webinar, is to what are the solutions? How do we become less self-critical? How do we move away from self-criticism? Because I've already showed you it's not helping you. It's not helping any of us. It's actually taking away from who you are. It's making you less than. And to be quite honest, it's cheating the world out of who you really are. So sit back for an amazing quote, one of my favorite quotes, and I love reading it. So here we go. This is really in relation to criticism by others. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know victory nor defeat. So it makes me have to come back to you. It's quite an amazing quote. It's quite an amazing quote because it shows us again, I talk a lot to my clients about criticism from others and other people's opinions of us. And, we take them to heart. We take them to mean so much. And I've already shared with you, I took, my mother's quote unquote opinion and ran with it for 35 years, and she doesn't even remember saying it. Great. Awesome. Thanks. Wish I'd known that about 3 months into it. But, other people's opinions of us, they are what they are. People are allowed to have opinions of us. I tell people all the time, they're none of our business. They really aren't. Like, the fact remains that there's quite a few people on this webinar tonight. Now, here's the deal. I'm showing up. You're all hearing the same exact thing. You're seeing the same exact person do these hand gestures and everything. You're hearing the same exact words. Some of you will like it, I hope. I hope all of you like it, but I can't control that. Some of you might like it a lot. Some of you may like it a little bit, and some of you may hate it. So what does that say about me? Nothing. It doesn't say a thing about me. Your opinion of what you're seeing here doesn't say anything about me. It says something about you. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It says that you showed up here maybe with a different expectation than what I was planning on fulfilling. It doesn't make me bad and you bad. It just means you showed up maybe expecting something that I didn't deliver, right? That doesn't mean anything negative about me. I'm just who I am. I'm just showing up as I am. Your opinion of me is what it is just because it's through your own lens, right? Your opinion of me is basically your thoughts about me. I can't possibly control your thoughts about me. I'd love to, though. It'd be so fun. Right? I can't control your thoughts about me, just like your veterinary clients, you can't control their thoughts about you. That's what's creating their opinions about you. Other people, the general public that you might be dealing with, right? Or your coworkers or your team or your staff, you can't control their thoughts about you. Those are their opinions. They get to they're just going to be what they're going to be, and they're based on them. So back to Teddy Roosevelt's quote here, he talks so beautifully. And if you're wondering, that quote came to me through Brene Brown. I believe her book, Daring Greatly, she titled after it because that quote meant so much to her. But she's basically, he's basically saying, Teddy Roosevelt in that is saying, you know what? It's like, if you're not out in the arena, then I don't really, then I'm not interested in your opinion of me. If you're not in the arena. Well, what do you mean by in the arena? If you're not in the world practicing veterinary medicine, if you're not in the world working in an animal rescue or animal shelter, doing the work that I'm doing, then I'm not interested in your opinion. You can give it because people will, right? So, all right, I will step off of that. Got very excited about that. All righty. So let's talk about connection to self, because this is really important. And I want you to really think about this. We are our best at our jobs and in our lives when we show up knowing we did our best. Let that sink in for a second. All we can ever do is what we can do. And to be quite honest, the rest is up to chance, or maybe it's up to faith, depending upon how you want to look at that. So in regards to self-criticism, and it was so funny because in creating this webinar for you guys, I found myself, I was like, all my criticism came to the surface. Isn't that perfect that happens? So I was dealing with that earlier in the week and muddling through it. And the truth becomes that if I was thinking self-critical thoughts about myself prior to sitting down and hitting the broadcast button on the webinar tonight, how do you think I would have shown up? Imagine if right before I was sitting here, I'm sitting here and I'm saying, you know what, this webinar is going to suck probably. I'm not going to be able to deliver. I'm probably going to stumble over my words. I'm going to forget what I'm going to say. No one's going to like it. No one's going to show up. If that's how I showed up for this webinar, can you imagine what it would have been like? It would have been a complete disaster. I can guarantee you that. So that's what I'm proposing to you, is the way we talk to ourselves is not just dangerous and deleterious to ourself and our connection to self, but it's also dangerous to how we show up in the world, because it makes us, again, show up less than. Isn't that interesting? We're thinking less than ourselves, so we think that we're not good enough, and then we show up less than anyways. It's almost like double here. So what is the solution? Well, first and foremost, the solution to self-criticism is the opposite of self-criticism. The opposite of self-hatred and self-assault is self-compassion. And lots of us don't know how to be compassionate to ourselves. That's all right. That's why we're here tonight, to talk about it. That's why we're here to learn. I'm not even sure if we come into the world being self-compassionate. We probably do. And it probably starts to eat away at ourselves sometime as we get older. I didn't really think about that before I said it, but I'm going to guess we do come into the world self-compassionate. We come into the world, here's the truth, is we come into the world really understanding our perfection in all of it, understanding that we're perfect exactly who we are. And the world, as we start living, it starts to chip away at us. We start believing other people. We start believing their word over ours. We start using their ideas about us to define our worth. And today I was coaching one of my clients who his thought about himself was that he has no, oh my gosh, I forgot it already. I looked at it 3 times before I sat down here to his exact words. I have no self, oh my gosh, what the heck was it? I almost want to get up and look. But it was basically, no, I have no self-confidence, something to that effect. And, when we believe that about ourselves, when we're thinking along those lines, when that's the illusion that we're believing, the story we're telling ourselves, of course, we don't do the things we want to do in the world. So some questions for you to think about, because these are all stories that we're telling ourselves. Like, you have your own story. You are creating your own story about yourself, right? So I want you to think about it. How does your story about yourself hold you back? Like, I know how my story about my body image has held me back my whole entire life. You've got probably some version of I'm not enough. So I want you to think about how your story holds you back. I might even come over to the chat to see if there's any questions on this. Oh, thank you for your comment, Rachel. So I want you to think about, how does your story hold you back? Another question. Who would you be without your story about yourself? Who would you be without the story that there's something wrong with you, that you're not a good enough mom, that you're good enough vet tech, that you're not a good enough dad, that you're not a good enough hospital administrator, right? Think about that. Who would you be without that story? I asked my client this today, who would you be without the story about yourself that you have no self-confidence? And you know what his answer was? His answer, he said it like this. He said, I'd be a world leader. I was like, my God, look what we do to ourselves. And we're doing this to ourselves. Okay, last question here. Who would you be without the limitations of someone else's opinion of you? Now, I want to be really clear here, because this is usually where I get some pushback, like, well, and I'm not suggesting that we go out into the world and be a jerk. No, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. I go out into the world every day and try to show up being the best that I am, having beliefs about myself that are positive, so that then everybody that I interact with, I'm showing up the best version of me, right? I'm showing up with confidence. I'm showing up full of love instead of fear. Because when I show up full of fear and hate, it's not fun to be around me. Ask my husband. He's in the room. I'm not calling him in here. I'm not letting him tell you what I'm really like when I'm like that. But I'm not like that all the time. All right. Going back. Couple more slides here. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. All right. So we went through those questions. Pop those up for you. Yeah, and these are such good questions to ask yourself. So here is where I empower you to own your own magnificence. This quote by Marianne Williamson, if you haven't seen this before, well, it's my pleasure to share it with you. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. I love that. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. Oh my gosh, I need to drink my seltzer. Done so much talking. Ooh, and I just crunched ice in your ear. So this is about owning who you are. Again, we all were born into our magnificence. Every single one of us was born being worthy, being lovable, 100% lovable and worthy. We don't have to do a thing. We were born. That's all we needed to ever do. You are not broken. I need you to know that. There is nothing wrong with you. Who you are is fabulous in all of your imperfections. Oh my God, that's what makes us so fantastic and wonderful. Our stories about ourselves are an illusion. And I hear this all the time because if you've spent more than a minute with me, you know I talk a lot about how our thoughts create our life. And I'm always preaching and preaching to myself as to you that, you know, when we think positive thoughts about ourselves, we feel positive and then we act positively, right? And sometimes people say, oh, well, aren't you just deluding yourself when you're telling yourself, you know, that that you're good at what you do or that you're a great doctor. Oh, I'm not a doctor. But like someone says, well, isn't that delusional? And I said, but here's what you don't understand. You telling yourself you're not a good doctor is delusional. You telling yourself you're a terrible mom, that's delusional. So it's all an illusion, right? So right now your stories about yourself that are negative are an illusion. And we choose to either buy into them or not. I'm suggesting, as you can probably tell, that we choose to not buy into them. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, what exactly does that look like? And I'm going to share that with you. But not before I empower you with one of the greatest teachers of all time, Bob Marley. If you're familiar with this quote from Redemption Song, let me share it with you. And if you're not, then just look at it as it is. So this quote right here says it all. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. I hope this lands with you as heavily as it is. This is a heavy, heavy quote, right? Yes, we do need to free ourselves from mental slavery. We hold the keys to our happiness. No one else is holding the key ring to your happiness. I guarantee you that. Not your boss, not your coworkers, not your clients, not your spouse. No one is holding the keys to your happiness but you. We get to free our minds. Self-criticism is keeping ourselves, you know, trapped into this small box. And it is synonymous to mental slavery. Absolutely. So how do we stop? I got you. I'm going to teach you that right now. How do we stop? First, you must stand in the mirror and stick your tongue out at yourself. You should. You know what? Matter of fact, stick your tongue out yourself right now. I want you to do that. I hope you're all doing it. I'll do it too. Okay. So how do we stop? Seriously, I'm in a goofy mood tonight. I hope I'm entertaining you. Know what's up with me tonight. All right. Honest to God, number one is to make a decision to no longer treat yourself the way you're treating yourself. What does that look like? I know you're already like, oh, this seems hokey. This is too woo-woo. This doesn't seem real to me. I want to teach you how this is really real. So some time ago, oh my gosh, probably 2-3 years ago, I made a decision that I was no longer going to beat myself up about my body, that I was going to love it if it had a couple extra lbs or not, that I was no longer going to use it as a reason to tear myself to shreds, to disconnect from myself. I made a decision to do that. It's the same decision I actually made to stop smoking cigarettes. So I don't know how many years ago I stopped smoking cigarettes. I got, right outside of college. So a long time ago. It's the same decision I made 3.6 years ago to stop drinking alcohol. It's the same decision I made 15, 20 years ago to stop using drugs. It's the same decision. Like literally, those are habits. Self-criticism, beating ourselves up, it's a habit too. You can make a decision right this second that you will no longer tolerate talking to yourself that way. You can absolutely make a decision in a split moment. Now, be clear. Let me be honest with you. That doesn't mean that your brain isn't going to offer it up to you all the time. My brain constantly offers up, hey, aren't you feeling a little fat today? My brain offers that up to me all the time. So I have to be emphatic about, no, I'm not going there. No, I don't do that anymore. I don't think like that anymore. No, time out. The same way that very often my brain offers up, hey, don't you want a glass of wine? Everyone else is drinking. Wouldn't it be great? It's a Friday. It's been a long day. You've been traveling, blah, blah. Same thing. What do I say to that? No. Same thing still. I haven't smoked cigarettes in, I couldn't tell you how long. I can smell a cigarette and be like, whoa, wouldn't mind one of those right now. So my brain offers that up to me, but I'm emphatic about the no. I'm really serious about this, right? Like literally, we think that there has to be something, we have to be deliberate with ourselves and hold to it and be consistent and have our own backs. Again, you would never allow someone to speak to you the way you speak to yourself. So stop allowing yourself to do it. Word. All right. Number 3, separate from the thoughts. Okay. So what does this mean? So again, be prepared the fact that even when we make the decision to not speak to ourselves this way, that the thoughts will come up and whatever the version is. And again, I've been using my I feel fat thing. So what separate from the thought means, and here's a little trick for you that is, that can work really well when you catch yourself. When I catch myself, all of a sudden, if I have that, I feel fat thought or something, what I'll do is I'll tell myself, or I'll separate from the thought and I'll say, I'm having the thought, I feel fat. You see what I did there? I'm having the thought. That separates me from the thought. When I say I'm having the thought that I'm not a good mom. You can take that one step farther and say, I notice I'm having the thought, I'm not a good hospital administrator. That's how you separate from the thought, because once you say, I notice that I'm having, or I'm having the thought, it no longer has that same pull. So try that. I want you to write that down. Should have told you to take notes on this, but you'll get the replay if you want to watch that again. All right. Number 4 is about being the protector of yourself. Right? I mean, you remember there was the protector is the rescuer, the villain, the victim, and the protector / rescuer. You're all great rescuers. You rescue animals in so many different ways every single day, right? So, wow. Like, what if you use that same energy, compassion, and care towards yourself? Be the protector of yourself. Again, this is no, I don't talk to myself that way anymore. No, I want to be kind to myself. And number 5 is also about having compassion for the villain inside, right? When we can have compassion for the part of us that can be cruel, that can be mean. If you can have compassion for that and say, wow, I see you, you'll all of a sudden realize that you start to have compassion for other villains in the world, the villains that you encounter. It'll be very interesting because you'll see they're just showing their villain self in the world. And number 6 is to create and practice new thoughts. So using my example here, create and practice a new thought. You have to deliberately tell your mind what to think. Left to its own devices, it likes to be very negative. So if you want to learn how to speak kinder to yourself, then first figure out what your go-to beat up phrase is. Again, mine, I feel fat, for instance, right? Whatever yours is, I'm blah, blah, blah. So then when you know what your standard phrase is, or at least the one you go to the most, everybody has one. You may have tons of them, right? But start with one. Rome wasn't built in a day. Let's take small steps here and create and practice a new thought. So for me, about my body, for instance, is literally like, I come to this place where I accept my body as it is today and every day. Like that's a new thought I practice every single day. I might go, you can't see what I'm doing, but like if I'm touching my belly, it might be like, and I might go, I accept my body exactly how it is. That's the new thought that I practice over and over and over again. Or I love myself exactly how I am, or I'm perfect just the way I am, right? If that's too much of a stretch, then back it down a little bit. Here's a new thought to practice. I like this one. You know, this is not necessarily a suggestion, but I heard this thought and I loved it. I'm enough and my imperfection doesn't change that. Oh, write that down. I love it. Such a good one. I am enough and my imperfection doesn't change it. My God, can you imagine how boring the world would be if we were all perfect? Oh my gosh, that would be so boring. Be so boring. I love my imperfections. I truly do. I laugh at them. I think they're funny. Like, I think I'm a joke. I mean, in the best possible way. That sounded like self-critical. I think I'm a joke. No, but I think I do. I laugh at all those things about myself. I laugh about how nervous I was right before I hit broadcast to be with you all today. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how nervous I am. So, all right, rounding it down, I know many of you are scientists, so I wanted to give you a research project, if you so choose. So here's the research project. The research project is this. So there's 2 experiments. Experiment number 1 is, so you can do this tomorrow. So, and probably work, right? Walk into work or wherever you're going somewhere. Maybe it's a meeting place or maybe it's the exam room. Or just into the exam room would be a great place, a place where there's a bunch of people. And walk in thinking, I need these people to like me. I need them to do what I want. And really step into that sense of needing people to like you and needing them to do what you want them to do. And notice how people interact with you. So that's experiment number 1. Here's experiment number 2. So typically you could do this. So for those of you that work in veterinary clinics, exam rooms, you could do the experiments, you know, the same day. You could just go into another exam room and do experiment number 2. Experiment number 2 is this time, prep yourself beforehand. And this is going to take a couple minutes for you to think about. And think, these people love me. They think I'm brilliant, caring, gracious, and amazing. I rock their world. And then notice how you show up, how you talk, their voice, how you command the room, how you behave, and even how you move. Notice the difference between the 2. It'll be amazing to you, right? And like I said earlier, if I showed up on this webinar thinking I need them to like me, I need them to do what I want, I need them all to, you know, sing my praises, I would have shown up really creepy. Like, I know I'm acting goofy, but that's just my nature. So that's your experiment if you are willing to engage in that. And I think, again, you will notice a big difference in how you show up in the world. And that's what this so much is about. I know each and every one of you has such a deep desire to make a difference. So do I. And the only way we can make a difference, though, is believing in ourselves. Even when we believe in ourselves, we believe that we're imperfect. Like right tonight, like I believed in myself enough to say, you know what? Because there's always a chance that you do a webinar and the technology gets screwed up. Like, I work with a great platform here, but you know, it's technology. Something can get screwed up. But I believe in myself enough to know that, you know what? Even if the technology doesn't work, I can still talk to you guys about what I was planning to talk to you about. Whether or not you see any slides, whether you see my face, it doesn't matter. I believe in myself enough that it doesn't have to go perfectly, that I know that I have my own back and I'll rise to the occasion. And in doing that, I have a much better chance of making a difference than if I don't. Then I'm worried and terrified. And it's like, oh my God, there's no way this is going to go well. And you didn't prepare enough. And you should have spent all day going over your slides and improving them. And you see the difference? So before I come back to I want to talk with you very briefly, and then I'm going to come back and answer questions. We've got a few minutes here. For those of you that are wondering how else can I help you, if you have seen me, I do on-site seminars and workshops. Again, I do these webinars. I mentioned I do private coaching, and I want to talk with you for a brief minute about my Compassion Fatigue RX course, because if you're looking to find a way to talk better to yourself, then this would be a great way to do it, because I really teach you how to manage your mind. And so much of this is about learning how to manage your mind, learning how to manage your thinking, learning how to take control of your mind so that you get to take control of your feeling states. Because the bottom line becomes this. I love that I have something written here on my desk that I want to share with you. Oops. 2 questions. How do I feel? And how do I want to feel? Those are 2 questions, right? Remember, you are responsible for the answer. We are all responsible for how we feel. And learning how to manage your mind makes you responsible for how you feel. So my 6-week online course starts on August the 25th. It's 6 weeks, but I give you longer than that to engage in the materials. There's 6 modules. Modules are released on Saturdays, and you get to take them at your own pace. There's videos and there's audios. And there are some worksheets to go along with each lesson, which really makes you be deliberate about the practices that I'm teaching you, and taking it from just consuming the material to implementing it. And it's when we implement things when we really make the change. There's also 6 weekly audios that you will also have to dive deeper in the topics, and you can listen to them on a run, on a walk, on your commute, any way you want to engage in those. You also get 2 60-minute private coaching sessions with me. There's an optional Facebook group to be a part of as well. The modules are, the first one is really about learning how to coach yourself, how to manage your mind. The second one is dealing with difficult people, and you know, how to navigate other human beings that cause us so much challenge in our lives. And that's so much what I hear from animal workers, is not so much the difficulty with animals. I hear about that, but overwhelmingly it's dealing with people. And for any of you that are feeling depleted and exhausted, certainly around compassion fatigue, you know, we need to create and enforce some boundaries in our lives. We also need to learn how to manage our stress. We need to learn how to take better care of ourselves. And by all means, meditation is such a great tool as well. So real quickly here, you know, if you're feeling the effects of compassion fatigue and it's affecting your life or your work, then this is right for you. If you're feeling stuck in any way, or you're feeling that nudge to want to change your life, this is a perfect opportunity to start that transformation. If you believe others would change, you'd be happy, then this would be a great course for you, because I'll teach you that others aren't going to change, but we get to change ourselves. If you're sick of beating yourself up, if you want to take better care of yourself, if you want accountability, and you'll learn what really causes how you feel. And it's not what you think it is, and how to change the way you do feel. You'll learn how to take the power back in your life, and you'll feel energized, and you can love your work again and make a decision from there, even if that decision is to leave it. Your relationships will improve. I hear that all the time, and I'm proud of that. You will feel happier. You will create sustainable ways to take excellent care of yourself. So just a couple quotes here, testimonials. Course is a great reminder. There's help for professionals who feel overworked and tired and underappreciated. Someone else said they appreciate the course was geared towards all roles in the field of animal care. Yeah, not just veterinary medicine either. It's really geared for ACOs, animal shelter workers, and vet medicine, lab animal as well. I work with that community a great deal. So registration is open. It's $297. I do give discounts. I have quite a few groups that take it, so I do give discounts for that. The URL, my website is www.rekindlesolutions.com/enroll to get in the program. And if you have any questions, more questions about the program, by all means, email me, or about the discounts, or if you're in a nonprofit, I do offer some special discounts for nonprofits as well. So that's that. I want to get back to see if there's any questions about we talked about tonight here. So let me get back to the chat. Anything over here in the chat? Was there a question? Let's see here. No, nothing here. Any questions from all you lovely people out there in the world? I loved having you with me tonight. Was this helpful? Anybody? Are you still there? Did I lose you? Thank you. You're welcome, Stephen. Stephen's still here. Oh, good, Margaret. Yes, yes, totally. Good, good, good. Very helpful. Good. Good. Any questions? I'm here as long as you. Oh, and I get to drink. Any questions? I take that, since there's no questions, that we nailed self-criticism. I can think of many people in my household that benefit from hearing about this. Wonderful. Yeah. So I don't know if you're talking about the course or this, still here. Good, Meredith. Good. I don't know if you're talking about the course or the webinar, but this will be available in replay if you want to share it with anybody, because we had such a good time together. I love you all, and I don't see any questions, so I want to be really respectful of your time. I know I went 3 minutes over, and I'm really respectful of your time because you gave me a lot of yours. So with that, I honor you deeply. I honor you, each and every one of you. I adore you. So please keep on taking really good care of yourself, and hope to see you somewhere really super soon. Oh, and you like my Friday emails. Yay. Thanks, Amber. All right. Be well. Good night, friends. Bye-bye.